Hi everybody, it's Nikki again, and I'm here to do another video that's my personal experience, and in this case, just a personal collection of information. Nothing to be used as medical advice, and possibly nothing that's correct, and that is the truth. I have been accumulating for a couple of months kind of some information, some stories from either YouTube comments or within my Facebook group or within another Facebook group whose name I cannot speak. And basically this is an update to my first sensor updating do not calibrate video, where at the time I knew nothing about any of it. I just knew that my sensor was updating and not to calibrate. I don't know much more at this point, but we have kind of, as I said, through a community effort, gathered a little bit of information about some possible, times where we might see this, possible causes, and very few solutions, but sometimes just knowing what's going on helps. Okay, so basically what we have is, assuming you're getting 7 days out of your sensor life, and that may or may not be a good assumption, even if you're getting 6 days, hopefully, and definitely at least 5, this is what we have. If you get a sensor updating in your first day of your sensor, and often you'll get it right off the bat, this is usually bad prognosis, poor prognosis. Not always. It can survive. I don't think they recover and are ever great, but they might be. In general, though, I think the reason we get sensor updating on that first day is because either we just have a bad sensor, or because there's been a bad insertion. Something's just not quite right, and it'll struggle for a little bit. It could go on for a couple of hours, maybe even half a day, but usually you kind of get it toward the beginning. In general, what I have seen is when it's happening on first day, my SG will drop down to around a 40. It usually happens with a sugar crash. It'll drop down to around a 40, and then it flatlines. So even after my BG, even after my blood sugar rebounds, it doesn't. And oftentimes it'll hang at 40, 41, 42, below 40, for a couple of hours. And at some point, I'll get a message saying sensor updating, do not calibrate, which more often than not was the beginning of the end. Now, in general, if you're not in a hurry and you get the message, hang in there, because some of them do recover. Days 2 through 5, I think, is kind of the next period. The only times I've gotten them during that period are usually when I've knocked my sensor loose from something. And Medtronic also, because they're Medtronic and they're allowed to pitch in, they also have a theory, and that is that in 2 through 5, they actually say this is true for the entire sensor life. But 2 through 5, I think, is the period where they're looking at adhesive as the possible culprit. So what they say to do is, if you get this message, just put on extra adhesive. As I said, day 1, often for me, it's a different problem. So adhesive is not the issue. However, days 2 through 5, I heard some people who were talking about, they've been doing heavy lifting. They were moving furniture. They've been at work all day, and they get this around day 4 or something like that. So in their case, with the sweat and the whatever, maybe your adhesive is, loosening, and maybe that's a good solution. Again, days 2 through 5, you get the message. There's no harm in letting it ride out to see what actually happens, and sticking on some adhesive. Days 6 through 7, I think are a sign of sensor degradation. In this case, for me, I think it's been 50-50 as to whether or not one has recovered. So, if I get it in the last 2 hours of the sensor, I'll yank the sensor, because I do not restart mine. I also have heard from people who do restart sensors that when they get that message, rarely do they get a sensor restarted and have it, turn out to be anything good. I can't speak to that because I don't do it. But I think that day 6, day 7, sometimes I have 12 hours left, or sometimes it's 9 o'clock at night, and I'll get this message, and I won't take everything out. I won't bother, because some of them recover. So I figure either it will recover, or I'd be doing a sensor warm up at 2 o'clock in the morning anyway. So either way, it makes no difference, and I'll ride it out. And some of them have turned out to be just fine, and some of them have gone on for another day or 2. That's it. The only other thing I could think of was, that's funny, I'm not even looking at the right paper here. The only thing I could think of is that it says it can occur for up to 4 hours, but sometimes it resolves itself much quicker than that. I think as you're approaching that 4 hours, there's a good chance it's just not going to happen. But sometimes it's 20 minutes later and it's done, and things are good again. And I did at one point, I believe, think that this was strictly an auto mode occurrence, but I can tell you twice last week, I ticked off my my sensor, something awful, and it like put me in a timeout, and that was the sensor updating. And the only reason I did it was because it was a failing sensor anyway, and I really wanted to get my SG caught up with my BG. And so I did a couple of my little tricks to try to get it, so that it would get closer. And it would get closer, but I was pushing it. I knew I was pushing it. And it would get closer, but just, for a couple of hours, and then it would begin to fall back again. And 3 times it let me calibrate it, 3 times it let me pull it closer, and on the 4th time it sent me to sensor updating, and that was in manual mode. And it did recover and went on to be a crappy sensor for 12 more hours before I yanked it. But that was, that's that. And I think that was everything I have on that. So I hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching. Bye.